The sound of gravel crunching under the tires broke the stillness of the morning. I had just stepped out onto my porch with a steaming mug of coffee, watching the mist drift lazily over the lake when I saw it, an unfamiliar white SUV crawling up my driveway. The logo on the side read Lakeside Homeowners Association. My stomach tightened. I had only moved into this cabin 3 weeks ago, hoping for peace, not trouble. The lake shimmered like glass, calm and untouched, and for a moment I thought maybe they were here for someone else. But then the door slammed open and out came a woman in her late 50s, sunglasses perched on her head, clipboard in hand, marching like she owned the place. She didn't even knock. She walked right up my porch steps and started pointing at my dock, her voice sharp and entitled. "You can't have that thing there. It's against HOA Regulation 4B. I blinked, caught off guard, setting my mug down. "Excuse me," I said, keeping my tone calm. "This is my property. That dock was approved by the county." But she wasn't listening. Her name tag read Marilyn, but I could already tell what kind of woman she was. She scanned the yard like a general inspecting a battlefield, muttering to herself about unregistered structures and unauthorized installations. Then she spun toward me and demanded, "You'll need to have that removed by the end of the week, or we'll issue a fine." I told her I wasn't part of her HOA. I had bought the land directly from the previous owner, a retired Navy officer who had all the legal documents. Marilyn scoffed, waving her clipboard. "Oh, everyone says that, but Lakeside Estates has jurisdiction over this area." I felt a flicker of irritation but tried to stay composed. "Actually," I said, walking over to my truck, "I have the deed right here. The lake and the dock fall under my property line." She ignored me and started snapping photos of my cabin and the dock like she was building a case. I could feel my patience thinning. "Ma'am, you're trespassing," I warned. "Leave my property now." That's when she smirked. "You don't scare me," she said, stepping closer. Her perfume hit me like a wall, floral, overpowering. "You new people think you can come in here and break the rules, not on my watch." I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice steady. "Look," I said, "I moved here for some peace and quiet. I'm not breaking any laws, now please." But before I could finish, she brushed past me and headed toward my door. "I'm inspecting the property," she declared. My pulse spiked. "You can't go in there," I shouted, but she'd already twisted the knob. The door creaked open, and she stepped inside like she owned the place. I followed, anger boiling up. "Get out of my house," I barked, my voice echoing against the wooden walls. She looked around, scribbling something on her clipboard, completely ignoring me. "Illegal modifications," she murmured, pointing to my newly installed shelves. "Unauthorized building additions." I clenched my fists. "You don't have the authority to inspect anything here." She turned smug. "Oh, we'll see about that when you get your fine in the mail." But then, footsteps, heavy ones, coming from the back room. Marilyn froze as the door swung open and a tall man stepped out. His presence filled the room instantly. Broad shoulders, pressed uniform, polished boots, the silver insignia gleamed on his chest. U.S. Army General. Marilyn's pen slipped from her hand, hitting the floor with a faint click. He looked at her with the calm authority of someone who'd commanded battlefields. "Is there a reason you're in my host's home without permission?" he asked, his voice low but firm. Marilyn stammered, her face draining of color. I'm from the HOA, sir. This property violates community guidelines." The general raised an eyebrow. "Community guidelines don't override federal property law." He stepped forward, towering over her. "You're trespassing." She tried to backtrack, muttering excuses, but the general's stare didn't waver. I stood beside him, feeling a strange mix of relief and disbelief. She had no idea who she'd just barged in on. The silence in the room was so thick you could hear the wind rustling through the trees outside. Marilyn's hand trembled as she reached for her clipboard, trying to look official again, but the tremor gave her away. The general took one more step closer. "Ma'am, I suggest you step outside before I call local law enforcement." His tone was measured, but there was steel in it. Marilyn swallowed hard, glancing at me, then at him, her voice barely a whisper. "You can't just out," he said simply. The single word carried more authority than any rulebook she could ever wave. She turned on her heel and stumbled toward the door, her heels clicking unevenly across the wooden floor. I followed behind her, still in shock at how fast everything had escalated. But deep down, I knew this wasn't over. When Marilyn stormed out of my cabin, I thought she would leave quietly, but of course, that's not how people like her operate. She stood on my porch, phone already in hand, snapping photos of my yard while mumbling something about evidence. The general followed her out, his boots striking the wood with heavy precision. He wasn't angry. He didn't need to be. His composure alone was enough to make her falter. "You can take all the pictures you want," he said coolly. "It doesn't change the fact that you entered private property without consent." I leaned against the porch railing, trying to steady my breathing. The morning calm had completely vanished. Even the lake seemed to have gone still, like it was waiting for what would happen next. Marilyn finally looked up from her phone, her face flushed with indignation. "You think you can intimidate me with that uniform?" she spat. "I'm just doing my duty as HOA president." The general's lips curved into the faintest hint of a smile. "Your duty doesn't include breaking and entering," he replied. "If I were you, I'd start worrying about explaining this to the sheriff." She froze, the color draining again from her face. Her fingers hovered over her phone as if she wanted to call someone but couldn't decide who. I could almost see the gears turning in her head, realizing she'd crossed a line she couldn't defend. Still, she tried to regain her footing. "You don't understand," she said quickly, her tone rising with panic. "This lake belongs to the association. It's in our charter." I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a thick, folded document. The paper crinkled in my hand as I unfolded it slowly. "This," I said, holding it up, "is the county deed. The lake is private property, mine, including the docks, the shoreline, and everything within 50 feet of it." The general took the document and glanced over it, nodding once in confirmation. "It's legitimate," he said, turning to Marilyn. "You've made a serious mistake." She blinked rapidly, her voice quivering. "This can't be right. We've always managed this area." The general crossed his arms. "Managing something doesn't mean owning it. You've been trespassing for years without realizing it." A small crowd had begun to form at the edge of the driveway, neighbors, curious and whispering among themselves. A few of them were holding their phones up, recording. Marilyn noticed and tried to straighten up, forcing a laugh. "Oh, don't believe everything you see. This man, he's confused. We're just sorting out a misunderstanding." But no one looked convinced. The sight of the uniform beside me spoke louder than her words ever could. Then the general did something I'll never forget. He took out his phone and made a single call. "Yes," he said calmly. "Trespassing, possible property violation. Send a unit to Lakeside Drive, Cabin 7. He didn't raise his voice, but every word carried authority. Marilyn's mouth fell open. "You called the police?" she hissed. He looked at her steadily. "No, I called law enforcement." The distinction hung in the air like a thunderclap. She backed away a step, her bravado crumbling. "You can't do this to me," she muttered. "I was just trying to enforce the rules." I stepped forward, my voice quiet but firm. "The rules don't apply when you're standing on someone else's land." She glared at me, tears of rage gathering in her eyes. "You don't belong here," she said bitterly. "People like you think you can just buy your way in and take over." I felt a flicker of pity, but it disappeared as quickly as it came. "People like me," I replied softly, "just follow the law." The general placed a steady hand on my shoulder, as if signaling me to let it go. His calm presence kept me grounded even as the tension hung thick in the air. The faint wail of sirens began to echo from the distance, and the crowd murmured. Marilyn turned pale. "Oh, for heaven's sake," she said, trying to laugh it off. "This is ridiculous. They'll see I was only doing my job." The general's expression didn't change. "Your job doesn't excuse trespassing. You entered a private residence uninvited. That's a serious offense." She opened her mouth to argue, but the sound of the patrol car pulling up cut her off. 2 deputies stepped out, their radios crackling softly. Marilyn straightened her shoulders and tried to look confident again, but her hands were still shaking. The deputies approached, one of them recognizing the general immediately. "Morning, sir," he said respectfully. "We got your call." The general nodded. "This woman entered my host's home without consent. She's claiming HOA authority, but the property doesn't fall under their jurisdiction." The deputy turned to Marilyn. "Is that true, ma'am?" She hesitated, her mouth opening and closing like she was searching for an excuse. "I was performing an inspection," she said weakly. "On whose authorization?" the deputy asked. She had no answer. Her clipboard hung limply at her side, useless now. The lake breeze picked up, rustling the papers, scattering one across the porch steps. She didn't even try to pick it up. The general watched silently, arms crossed. I could feel the shift in the air, the kind of silence that comes right before consequences land. The deputy finally sighed. "Ma'am, we're going to need you to step down from the property for now while we sort this out." Marilyn's lips trembled. "This is absurd," she whispered, but as the neighbor's cameras stayed trained on her, she finally turned away and started walking toward her SUV. Her shoulders, once so rigid and proud, now slumped in defeat. But even as she left, I knew deep down that the full truth about this lake, and why the general was really here, hadn't been revealed yet. As the patrol car drove away with Marilyn sitting in the back seat, the crowd slowly began to disperse. Some of the neighbors gave me cautious smiles, others whispered things I couldn't hear. The general stood beside me, his posture relaxed now, though his eyes remained sharp. The sun had fully risen, its reflection glittering off the calm surface of the lake. For the first time that morning, I felt a strange stillness, a quiet before the next storm. I turned to him. "I didn't expect you'd be the one to open that door," I admitted. He gave a small chuckle. Neither did she. We walked down toward the dock, the wood creaking under our steps. I could still see the faint scuffs from Marilyn's heels on the porch behind us. "You handled that well," the general said. "Most people would have lost their temper." I shrugged, glancing out at the water. "I was close, but I figured shouting wouldn't change her mind." He nodded approvingly. "Smart man. Some battles are won by keeping your calm." His voice carried the weight of experience, like someone who'd seen far worse confrontations. I hesitated before asking, "Why did you decide to meet here, sir, of all places?" He smiled faintly. "This lake has history," he said. "Back in the 70s, it was part of a military training reserve. I used to come here as a young officer. When I heard you'd bought it, I wanted to make sure you knew what you were sitting on." My eyebrows lifted. "You mean this land used to belong to the government?" He nodded. "Until it was decommissioned and sold privately. Most people don't realize the paperwork still lists federal oversight for certain security purposes." That explained the layer of mystery surrounding the property, and why the county deed had been so carefully documented. The general looked out over the water, his expression distant. "People like that woman, Marilyn, they think authority means control, but true authority comes from responsibility." I watched the ripples shimmer under the morning light. The silence between us wasn't awkward. It was grounding. "So what happens now?" I asked finally. He turned toward me, his voice calm. "She'll be questioned, probably fined for trespassing, but the bigger picture here, you've just exposed an HOA overreach that's been going on for years." I blinked. "Years?" He nodded. "They've been claiming maintenance fees for areas they don't legally own. You just gave the county a reason to investigate." I let out a low whistle. "Guess I moved in at the right time." He smirked. "Or maybe you were meant to." We stood there for a moment, the quiet lapping of the waves filling the air. I could smell the faint scent of pine from the forest beyond. Somewhere, a loon called across the lake, its cry echoing hauntingly. It felt peaceful again finally, but part of me couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just about property lines or HOA power plays. It was about standing your ground, literally and morally. I looked at the general, his hands folded behind his back, his eyes steady on the horizon. "Thank you," I said quietly. He shook his head. "No need to thank me. Just remember what you learned today." Before he left, he handed me a small envelope. "Keep this safe," he said. Inside was an official document, confirmation of federal clearance on the lake property, with his signature at the bottom. "If anyone else tries to claim ownership," he added, "show them this. It'll shut them down before they even start." I smiled, tucking the paper carefully into my jacket pocket. The morning breeze rustled through the trees again, softer now, almost like a sigh of relief. The general gave a brief salute before heading toward his black SUV parked near the tree line. I watched him go, feeling a mix of gratitude and disbelief. As his vehicle disappeared down the dirt road, I turned back toward the lake. The water shimmered, calm and silver under the sun, like it was erasing the chaos of the morning. I picked up the coffee mug I'd left on the porch hours earlier. It was cold now, but I didn't mind. I took a slow sip, staring out at the reflection of the sky. The peace I'd come here searching for had returned, but it had come at a cost, yet somehow I knew it was worth it. Sometimes peace isn't just about silence. It's about knowing you stood your ground when it mattered most. Before we dive out of this story, comment which country you're watching from and tell me, what would you have done if a stranger broke into your home claiming authority? Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more real, life justice stories.